Hi there. It is Friday afternoon up here on God's Hill, and I'm in the sanctuary of Emmanuel Reformed United Church of Christ here in Murraysville. And I wanted to share with you part 2 of my message from Wednesday, March the 25th. So if you haven't seen that part, this may make a little bit more sense if you watch the March 25th part first. And what I'd like to talk to you about today, the last one was about Luke chapter 8 and the Christian response to the coronavirus. What I want to talk to you about today is a continuation of that. When I was out grocery shopping the other day, I was struck by the emptiness of the streets and how many stores on the main drag through Murraysville. Normally the shopping centers would have cars in their parking lots, and there weren't any cars in many of the parking lots. A few grocery stores, but most of the lots were empty. And I don't have anything in my experience to compare that with, as I'm sure very few of us do. However, when I thought about it a little bit more, the closest I could come to think of about what was going on, or what it reminded me of, rather, the empty streets and the empty shops, it reminded me of the time that my wife and I lived in Germany. And the Germans have this time called Ferien, which means a break, like spring break kind of thing. And what happens in German culture during the summer Ferien, when you're supposed to go on vacation, and during the Christmas time Ferien, which is the week between Christmas and New Year's, what happens then is that many of the shops that you would normally go to in that part of town would be closed, because that is when the shopkeepers are taking their time to be with their family or to go on vacation. So very few shops would be open. Many of the grocery stores even close or have reduced hours during that time. And the economy sort of comes to a standstill. And when we were doing tourist sorts of things in Germany, when we arrived, our first week of being in Germany, when we arrived, it was during the Ferien site, and so that meant there weren't very many places to go eat. The library wasn't open, the gym wasn't open, the YMCA, all that stuff was closed. And the reason I mention that is because it's the closest thing I can think of what we're going through now. And I want you to hear me very clearly right now when I explain this. This is not to slight anyone who is going through economic hardship right now, particularly those people who have either lost their jobs temporarily, I hope, or small business owners or anything like that. If you look at the previous video from the 25th, you'll see that in there I want all Christians to say, "We care for you," and that includes shopkeepers, that includes small business owners, that includes people in the restaurant industry. We care for you, period. That's really, really important as we go through this economically tough time. And the reason I mention this, though, is because we don't yet know the impact of what this shutdown is going to have. And there's a possibility that we can gain some resources of rest for our economy from our own scriptures, from our own tradition. In the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, God prescribes for the people. He prescribes for the people every 7th year that the land is to take a Sabbath, and you are to let the land lay fallow so that you can plant your crops the next year and give the land a time to rejuvenate. And you just have to plan ahead in order to do the Sabbath year planting. But also in Leviticus 25, after there are 7 Sabbath years, 7 times 7, 49 years plus 1, there's something that God institutes for the people of Israel called the Jubilee year, and that's even more radical. Not only are the fields to lie fallow, but if you have been have had to leave your ancestral homeland, you go back to the land which has been in your family for generations. Prisoners are to be set free. Debts are to be forgiven on the 50th year or Jubilee year in Leviticus 25. There is a different way, God says, to set up our economy and our culture. So the reason I mention this and the reason I mention German culture and economy is some societies do this differently. Sure, shutting down the economy is very difficult right now. And I'm not saying that that's going to be an easy thing for us to do, but where we are right now is in a tough spot. And if this means that people will be able to live, if this means that people will be able to not get sick, what choice do we have? We've got some real issues to work out. However, the reason I mention Leviticus 25 and Germany is because it's time for us to think using our imaginations, to think using the same manner of thinking that God does in Leviticus 25. People come first, not some abstract concept like the economy. We have to invest in each other. And if we're going to pull out of this, the reason we're going to pull out of this is because we're going to invest in people. We're going to invest in small businesses. We're going to invest in churches. Everybody I know, everybody I talk to is worried about what kind of impact this is going to have, how this is going to affect somebody's paycheck. And it's your turn to be careful, to be generous, to be brave and courageous, to help other people. We're going to need that more now than ever, because no matter how we come out of this, we have to take care of one another. We absolutely have to take care of one another. I want to leave you with this. When the early church started in the few years after, the few decades and years after Jesus was resurrected, one of the things that the Christian church did very well was the Christian church said, we value you. We value life. And Christians would adopt orphans. That's how orphanages got started. Because in Roman society, if you had a child that would have a handicap or could not be paid for, you already had too many kids, Roman society was tremendously brutal to those children. And they would leave them for dead. Christians thought that was obscene, that that person was a child of God and that that person should be taken care of. Christians started orphanages. Christians started hospitals. They took care of the infirm. They took care of the dying. And the call of Christians in this day and age is no different. Our call is to take care of the most vulnerable in society. Sure, things are going to be difficult for us. Sure, things are going to be difficult for people who already have a lot. We're going to see our resources tested. But if we can use our imaginations, if we can admit that the economy can be created and changed differently, if we can use our imaginations to figure out how we can economically reach out to one another in a personal way, in a heartfelt way, in a Christian way, then we can change the future going here forward. I wish you all the best. I hope to talk to you soon. If you have any comments or would like to ask any questions of me, please do so in the comments area below. Invite your friends to come hear these messages. These are daily spiritual lifts from Emmanuel Reformed Church of the United Church of Christ. Thank you.